Off the ball. This is News Talk.
Yeah, you're very welcome back. So very happy to say that Jeremy Whittle, who was covering the Tour de France for The Guardian, is with us. Also the author of Bad Blood, The Secret Life of the Tour de France. Evening, Jeremy.
Hello there.
Thanks for joining us. I know we invited you on yesterday. I think you wanted at least one day to try and decompress and see family. It's a slog, I'm sure, to cover this thing, let alone ride in it.
Well, the problem is, of course, I've had to go into 2 weeks of self-isolation now because there's the rules. So I'm sort of in the back bedroom, trying not to, trying to see everybody, but not keep my distance at the same time. So it's this weird scenario, but that's the way it is at the moment, isn't it? So not much I can do.
Weird times generally. How did the overall experience compare to a pre-COVID tour?
I think it was really different because obviously we were limited access to the riders and to the teams. We were kind of constrained within the press room as to, how much contact we had with our colleagues, and obviously everything was kind of distanced and we were masked up. It's pretty uncomfortable sometimes. It was really hot, actually. It was unseasonably hot. So we were wearing masks kind of, 6-7 hours a day in a press room. And then basically I put on a mask when I left the hotel room in the morning to go and have a cup of coffee through till when I arrived back, in the hotel room at kind of 11 o'clock at night as well. So it was strange and it was surreal at times as well. And the denouement of the whole tour, the cliffhanging finale that turned into this explosive time trial, that was bizarre and extraordinary as well.
And as a spectacle, as a race, I mean, you mentioned there the finale, that certainly grabbed the attention. Generally, did it grab you overall, the tour, across the couple of weeks?
I thought it was kind of quite hit and miss. I mean, there's a lot of disagreement with that perspective. Lots of people seem to think it was the greatest tour ever, but it had one amazing stage, and then it had a couple of really good mountain stages, and it had a great crosswind stage. So it probably had a third of it was really gripping. And then there were some days when, as I think I wrote, it felt like a kind of, very high-end sportive where people had paid a lot of money to kind of go along with team cars and stuff. But so it had a couple of flat days. But I don't think it was a 5-star Tour de France. I'd say it was a kind of 3.5 to 4, which was kind of elevated by that just bizarre Saturday, that bizarre hour of racing on the final Saturday.
What was the best tour you covered, as a matter of interest?
Actually, people will get upset because I think the best tour I covered was 2003, which was Armstrong against Ulrich. And people say, well, of course, they're a pair of dopers. And they are a pair of dopers. But the thing about that was that at the time, we kind of had, strong suspicions, but we didn't know. And there was this great duel between them in terms of their personalities. And I just found... sport. You want your sports stars to be larger than life, and they both were, and we know now why they're larger than life. And obviously, I've got older than them certainly, and they are both a lot older and middle aged now. But in terms of drama, that felt like an exciting tour. But I mean, actually, the best one was probably the Festina one, which is even worse for me to say that, because that was just thrilling as a journalist, because there were like news stories just going off like hand grenades all around us. So that was very exciting.
Well, it's kind of quite telling that these are the moments that your mind suddenly goes back to. So we're trying to make sense of where we are. Obviously, in this part of the world, Sam Bennett was very much the focus for obvious reasons. But to take, to put the green flag down for a moment, to take a broader look at where we are. So, you mentioned even recent history. We have Festina, it's a complete mess. We have the Lance era, which is kind of pantomime stuff. It's such a charade, it turns out. We have Team Sky dominance, and there's jiffy bags and testosterone and, frankly, embarrassing testimony before English Parliament. And now here we are. So word has come through, for instance, and maybe this is a good jumping off point so we can start off on concrete terrain. Word has come through, public health officers in France searched the room of Nairo Quintana. 3 podiums on the tour in his time, a former winner of the Giro, former winner of the Vuelta, a 17th overall this year. They searched the room of, his room and that of his team after stage 17, it emerged, Jeremy. So there's a preliminary inquiry, it seems, over suspicions of doping. This has been opened by the health department in Marseille, is that right?
That's right, public health in Marseille, who Yeah, who have also been involved in a couple of investigations in the past as well. One of them focused on a French rider called Remy Di Gregorio, and that was a doping investigation as well. I mean, it's too early to really draw any conclusions from this, other than you would assume that they wouldn't just randomly raid somebody's hotel rooms, a team's hotel rooms, and also their vehicles without having some degree of information prior to that, because they didn't raid other teams. They specifically chose this team. They specifically chose Nairo Quintana, and they interviewed him and his brother, and also one of the team doctors and a physio as well. And I mean, it's kind of the timing couldn't have been worse, because the news broke on the Monday after the tour ended. And it's interesting that they actually did the raid in Meribel, which is the final Wednesday of the final week of the tour. When they'd done that climb up to the Col de la Loze. I'm sure people remember that, because it was a kind of monster climb that ended up with all the riders split up, basically. So they did the raid after that stage. And it didn't come out as having happened until the Monday after the tour. So presumably that was agreed, that, you know, it wouldn't become public knowledge. But I think it just adds up to that kind of climate of, I don't quite know what's going on at the moment. I mean, I think we had a period where it felt like people were very open and transparent, and that was kind of, I guess, post-Armstrong, post the reasoned decision against Armstrong by US anti-doping. We had a period when kind of, you know, you could talk quite openly in press conferences, you could ask quite openly, challenge people, and I thought that was really good. We had a great open discourse, and it felt like everybody wanted the same thing, which was to leave this behind and move on. Doesn't feel like that anymore. I felt this tour was edging back a little bit, hitting reverse a little bit towards the bad old days. Not I don't know specifically in terms of doping, but I'm just saying in terms of the climate being a bit more, don't ask any questions. And I think, I mean, I read a piece in The Guardian, which I guess you've seen, obviously, which said, you know, if it feels like, you know, you should just be happy that the tour happened because there's a pandemic going on, and you shouldn't say anything that's kind of like, well, hang on a minute, I want to ask questions about this. And I did, in fact, ask Primoz Roglic about his credibility not last Sunday, the Sunday before, after the stage to the Grand Colombier. And I got quite a lot of heat from that, from some colleagues in the press room, some people who used to be team PRs. Roglic himself seemed okay with it, and then one of his teammates made some comments about it lacking respect as well. But I think it's a question you should always be able to ask. It may be, you know, they can only give one answer, which is, of course, you can trust me. But at the same time, he's on record saying he can be trusted. So I think that's important.
I'm amazed anyone in the press room has an issue with a question like that at this stage, given everything.
Well, I think there's some people in the press room who haven't been in the press room as long as I have, and I've been there a long time, I guess. So anybody who grew up with Armstrong and with Floyd Landis, and then kind of, you know, other people who we've had pull the wool over our eyes since then, which is also where it led me to be kind of concerned about the context surrounding the Tour de France winner Tadej Pogačar, because there's a context around his team management as well, which is something else I wrote about in the paper. Yeah,
so let's unpack that then for a moment. Today, Pogačar, 22 years of age during the Tour, you know, youngest winner in a very long time, and you, in your piece in The Guardian, for instance, talk about the worrying history of his management team, in particular. So UAE Team Emirates, it's run by Mauro Gianetti, team principal, CEO. You make the point, he's been at the heart of a series of notorious incidents over the past 20, 25 years. There was, in 2008, there was a big EPO scandal involving one of his riders. I think the team had to bow out of that tour. Am I right in saying David Miller wrote to the UCI? He had concerns about what he saw working under Gianetti?
Yeah, I mean, I worked with David Miller on his book, his first book, Racing to the Dark, and in that there's a passage about he made his comeback from his doping ban in 2000. He made his comeback from his doping ban and joined the Sonia Duval team, because they were one of the few teams that would, at that time, would give him a contract. And when he joined the team, he was quite evangelical about anti-doping, and he grew very concerned about some of the things that were going on in the team. So to the extent, to the point where he actually wrote to Christian Prudhomme, who's the director of the Tour de France, and he also wrote to Pat McQuaid, who was then the president of the UCI, and said, you know, you need to talk to this team and do something about this team because I'm seriously concerned about their anti-doping attitudes. And it wasn't specific about kind of, you know, he didn't name names and go into specifics about what exactly was going on. But I know as well that he spoke as a result of the letter. He spoke to both UCI and to ASO who run the tour, and that they were informed about what was going on. And then I think pretty soon after that, that was when the scandal broke at the 2008 tour, when they kind of flew in the mountain stages, the hardest mountain stages, the Pyrenees to Otakam. The team shone. I think they got 1 and 2 on the stage. And anyway, they got booted off unceremoniously. The police turned up. They were carted off and arrested, and the team left and the sponsor left as well, all within space of kind of a few days. It was quite a remarkable fall from grace, even by the tour standards.
And, you know, Mauro Gianetti may well say he's not here to defend himself. He knew nothing about this. But Juan Jose Cobo as well. This was another team, Gianetti. Again, Gianetti, to keep people with us, is overseeing the team of the 2020 winner here today, Pogačar. What happened with another one of his riders, Juan Jose Cobo?
Okay, so after Sonia Duval folded, that team folded in 2008, he kind of lay low for a little while. Then he came back in 2010, 2011 with a team called Geox TMC. And they had a rider from Sonia Duval, who'd been the Sonia Duval team, competing in the Tour of Spain, and he won it. And when he won it, it was at the expense of Chris Froome. People were quite surprised because he'd never shown kind of Grand Tour winning, not really shown Grand Tour winning form before. He'd ridden Grand Tours before, right. but it was pretty out of the blue, I guess. And in 2019, it took a long time, but in 2019, he was finally stripped for anomalies on his biological passport that led them to believe he had been blood doping, and he was stripped to the win in, you know, he won in 2011. He lost the title in 2019. It's an incredible kind of time span. And Chris Froome, this is when Chris Froome had his smash in June 2019, and he was recovering in hospital. He was actually recovering at home. Yeah. And he found out a month later that he'd won his first Grand Tour by Cobo being stripped. So that's another involvement of Gianetti. So the omens around him and the context around him, and of course, I totally take on board if people say, well, you know, people can change. You know, that's a long time ago, Jeremy. Of course they can, yeah. And if they have changed, then that's great. But I think the context around him is sufficient for people to have, you know, anxieties and to ask questions, yeah, quite reasonably, yeah.
So Pogačar, for his part, the winner, you know, this is all put to him, and he comes out, as you might expect, defends himself very strongly. I'm too young to remember that era, he says. I was 10 in 2008, and it's strange to be talking about it. It goes against everything I believe in. I know that doping puts the health of athletes in danger. I've always been aware of that. We've nothing to hide today. And I think that cycling, despite the climate of suspicion, has done a lot to fight doping. In truth, it saddens me that people doubt my performances. My only defence is that I am happy with my conscience. Yeah. And as ever, you know...
He just stopped short of saying, I'm sorry, you don't believe in miracles.
But the point is as well, you know, we have heard the most seemingly, you know, genuine, earnest defences time and time again. So it just, unfortunately, if he was telling the truth, it counts for nothing, because we've heard it from however many people in the past. So Jeremy, you know, there are certain red flags sometimes. Like I think with Team Sky, people saw Gert Leinders and thought, oh, don't like the look at that. How many Mauro Gianettis, so those with his past, are populating the Tour in 2020 in powerful positions at various teams? How many are there out there?
Oh gosh, there's in terms of people who are running teams who were around and either confessed or were convicted of doping during the Generation EPO years, which I basically would be from kind of pre-Festina through to kind of the end of Armstrong. There's lots of people running teams. There's almost too many to name names, right. But they've been there for a while. And I mean, the standpoint, I guess, that you get from those people is, well, I've learned from my mistakes. Now, you know, I'm sure all reasonable people agree that if somebody is sanctioned or they undergo punishment or a ban for having done something wrong, whether it's in sport or whatever it may be, then ultimately they can resume their life once they've served their time. I think that's a reasonable principle, and of course it's a principle that really applies to cycling as well. But at the same time, I still think it's reasonable that those people would latterly be questioned about, okay, so how did you achieve this? We want chapter and verse on how you achieved it, and we want to know completely, we want to have assurances that it was all above board and completely ethical. And I think what worries me is that if you start saying that, it's almost like everybody starts shushing you. And I got that feeling that, you can't, a few years ago, it felt like you could ask the questions about ethics and credibility. And it feels like that door is slowly shutting again.
So, post Festina, one of the points made was that we're not going to see performances like that again. And then the following year, Lance Armstrong went faster than the dopers the year before, and there were, everything from the bikes were talked about to the quality of road was talked about, So I am cognizant as well that pretty much any sport currently the performances are better than 20 years ago. But can you give us a view on the quality of performances that we're seeing in 2020? How believable are they as a whole in comparison with what you saw over previous years?
I'm going to be really, really honest with you and say, no, I can't. And the reason for that is because I don't know where the line in the sand is that says, obviously people are going to be running faster than Roger Bannister now. How many years is it that we think, well, that's a reasonable improvement, that is a credible improvement? Is it, obviously riders are going to be going faster than Fausto Coppi. They're going to be going faster than Jacques Anquetil. They're going to be going faster than Eddie Merckx. Are they going to be going faster than Miguel Indurain? Are they going to be going faster than Lance Armstrong? What year do we say is the year where it has reasonable degree of kind of credibility? Because I think over a 20-year time span, you would expect, wouldn't you? You would expect people to improve?
Yes, in every other sport. I mean, watch a football match from 20 years ago. It's a natural thing, and that's why it makes it very, very difficult to know. We might, maybe a Dr. Ross Tucker or something might have a view on it. Like, I think a lot of the sprint records from female athletes in the 1980s stand today because the drugs used then had such a profound effect on female athletes in particular. So it's very difficult terrain to know. Is the Tour as grueling as ever? Like, it's the best cyclists in the world. Some of them can't finish it. Is it as tough as ever?
I think it was brutal this year, and everybody I've talked to thought it was brutal as well. And I think one of the reasons for that was because of lockdown, of course, first of all, that they didn't have any kind of they didn't have any rhythm in terms of, having ridden certain, so, the season has that rhythm, which everybody who follows cycling knows, the spring races, the classics, then you get the big one-day races before you get the Grand Tours, and then the kind of week-long stage races before you get the Grand Tours, and then you go into these monumental Grand Tours. They didn't really have that. They had a few short races, 3, 4, 5 days, 2 or 3 of them, and then they went straight into the Grand Tours, straight into the Tour de France, the biggest and hardest race, the most stressful race of them all. And I think because the pandemic was going on, because of all the logistical issues and the anxiety around the Tour, apart from the normal testing, there was also the COVID testing, which was hanging over people like a guillotine, because if they failed, if a team had 2 positives in terms of the COVID testing, then they were off the race if they had that within 7 days. So people were very anxious, and I think it was really stressful. I wouldn't underestimate that. And then of course you've got to ride it as well, and the course and it was billed as being the highest tour ever. I don't think it was the highest tour ever in terms of the length of the climbs and stuff like that, but the steepness of some of the climbs and the packed final week. The final week was really, really brutal. I mean, it was pretty unrelenting. So it's no wonder that a lot of riders were literally on their knees and scrapping through. I mean, at times you think, well, if you want to have credibility and ethics, then maybe this sport is just off the scale in terms of what it expects of the athletes. And I think that's a reasonable argument as well. Yeah.
So a final word to kind of round up where we are then on the back of all this. I mean, on Pogacar's win, you quote, I think, one skeptic maybe in the press room with you who said, for now, they're keeping their hands by their sides as a reaction to this win.
That's David Walsh.
Right, okay. So
who said that about Lance Armstrong? He didn't say it about Pogacar, but I was paraphrasing what he said. And that's how I feel.
Okay, so
that's how I feel.
You're keeping your hands by your sides. Okay.
Yeah, I'm keeping my hands by my side because I don't know what I think about it, and my feeling is that we will hear more about that victory as well in the coming months.
Okay. Jeremy Whittle from The Guardian, best of luck with the self-quarantining. Thanks so much.
Cheers.
Off the Ball on News Talk.